Damien Archer couldn't sleep. Again. At 2:17 a.m., he gave up wrestling with his sheets and padded barefoot to the kitchen, seeking tea or whiskey, anything to quiet his restless mind. His Beverly Hills mansion felt like a tomb, all marble and silence. He turned the corner and stopped dead. Grace Nolan sat at his kitchen island, textbooks spread around her like armor. Her uniform was gone, replaced by worn jeans and a faded sweatshirt. Her dark hair fell loose around her shoulders as she hunched over a laptop displaying anatomy diagrams, scribbling notes with fierce concentration. She looked up, brown eyes flashing with defiance instead of the apology he expected. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded. "Building a future," she shot back, her voice steady and unapologetic. "Something you wouldn't understand." The boldness hit him like a slap. No employee had ever spoken to him like that. Hell, no one had spoken to him like that in years. This wasn't the invisible maid who cleaned his house with quiet efficiency. This was a woman with fire in her veins. "This is my house, and these are my dreams." Her hand moved protectively over her textbooks. "I work 2 jobs to pay for nursing school. I study when I can because I refuse to scrub floors forever. Fire me if you want, but I won't apologize for trying to survive." Damien stared at her, genuinely speechless. In his world of boardrooms and country clubs, struggle was an abstract concept, but Grace wore hers like battle scars, and somehow that made her more real than anyone he'd ever met. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with designer clothes or surgical enhancements. Raw, honest, dangerous. "How long have you been doing this?" he asked, his voice softer now. "Every night for 8 months. She lifted her chin. "After I finish cleaning your house, I come down here because it's the only quiet place I know. The kitchen light is better than what I have at home." The admission hung between them. She lived in poverty while he swam in luxury. Yet here she was, fighting harder for her future than he'd ever fought for anything. The contrast made him feel hollow. "What's your GPA?" he found himself asking. 3.8. Pride flickered in her eyes. "Full scholarship depends on keeping it above 3.5. Damien nodded slowly, something shifting in his chest. This woman cleaned his toilets by day and studied molecular biology by night. She had more drive in her little finger than he had in his entire body. "Coffee's probably cold," he said finally. Grace blinked, surprised by the change in his tone. "I can make fresh—" "No." He moved to the expensive espresso machine she'd probably never been allowed to touch. "I'll make it." As he worked, he could feel her watching him, confusion replacing the defiance in her eyes. Neither of them understood what was happening, but something had definitely changed in the space between her bold words and his unexpected kindness. The night suddenly felt full of possibilities neither of them were prepared for. Grace watched in stunned silence as Damien Archer, billionaire tech mogul who probably had assistants to tie his shoes, operated his espresso machine with surprising competence. Steam hissed and coffee beans ground while she sat frozen, unsure if this was kindness or some elaborate setup for her termination. "You don't have to," she started. "Relax." He didn't look at her, focused on perfecting the coffee with an intensity she'd only seen him display during business calls. "I'm not firing you." The relief that washed over her was almost embarrassing. This job paid better than anything else she'd found, and losing it would mean dropping out of school. Again. He set a perfect cappuccino in front of her. The foam swirled into an intricate pattern that probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget at the cafes in Beverly Hills. She cupped the warm mug, inhaling the rich aroma. "Thank you," she whispered. Damien poured himself a simple black coffee and leaned against the opposite counter, studying her with those intense gray eyes that made her feel exposed. "Tell me about the program." "Why?" Suspicion crept into her voice. Rich people didn't ask poor people about their dreams unless they wanted something. "Because I'm curious." He sipped his coffee, waiting. Grace hesitated, then decided honesty had gotten her this far. "It's a 2-year program, night classes, clinical rotations on weekends. If I can maintain my grades and survive the workload, I'll be an RN in 18 months. "What kind of nursing?" "Emergency medicine." The admission came easier now. "I want to work in trauma units. Help people when they're at their worst." Something flickered across his face. "Respect, maybe." "That's not easy work." "Neither is this." She gestured around his pristine kitchen. "But at least saving lives means something." The words slipped out before she could stop them, and she immediately regretted the implication. Damien's jaw tightened. "You think what I do is meaningless?" Grace met his stare, refusing to back down. I think you've never had to choose between textbooks and groceries. Between rent and medicine. You've never had to smile while people treat you like furniture because you need the job too badly to quit. You don't know anything about my life. I know enough. She closed her textbook with more force than necessary. I know you have more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes while your housekeeper works 2 jobs to afford community college. I know you probably spent more on that coffee machine than I'll make this month. Damien's eyes darkened, but instead of the anger she expected, she saw something else. Pain, maybe. Loneliness. You're right, he said quietly. I don't know what it's like to struggle for basic necessities, but you don't know what it's like to have everything and feel completely empty. The admission hung between them, raw and unexpected. Grace found herself really looking at him for the first time, not as her wealthy employer, but as a man. She saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the way he held himself like someone carrying invisible weight. Why can't you sleep? She asked softly. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Nightmares. Insomnia. Take your pick. Success comes with its own prison. At least your prison has good coffee. To her surprise, he almost smiled. There is that. They stood in comfortable silence, sipping their drinks while the kitchen clock ticked toward 3 a.m. Grace found herself stealing glances at him, noting how different he looked without the armor of expensive suits and corporate confidence. Vulnerable. Human. I should go, she said finally, gathering her books. You need sleep, and I have to be at my other job by 6. Other job? Diner on Sunset. Breakfast shift before I come here. She shouldered her worn backpack. Thank you for the coffee, and for not firing me. As she reached the door, his voice stopped her. Grace? She turned back. Good luck with your exam tomorrow, the one you were studying for. Her heart skipped. He'd been paying attention, really paying attention. How did you... Your notes. Cardiovascular system, right? She nodded, surprised he'd noticed such a small detail. You'll do fine, he said. You're tougher than you know. Walking home through the empty streets, Grace couldn't shake the feeling that everything had just changed. Over the next 2 weeks, Damien found himself making excuses to wander into whatever room Grace was cleaning. He told himself he was checking on her work, but that was bullshit and he knew it. He was watching her. The way she hummed softly while folding his mother's antique linens with reverent care. How she organized his chaotic home office with an efficiency that put his executive assistant to shame. The gentle precision with which she arranged flowers in his unused dining room, as if beauty mattered even when no one was there to see it. Grace moved through his house like she belonged there, bringing life to spaces that had felt dead for years. She's different, his mother Helena observed during her weekly visit. The 70-year-old socialite rarely paid attention to domestic staff, but Grace had apparently caught her eye too, more educated than the others. You can tell by how she handles my china. Damien paused in reviewing contracts, watching through his study window as Grace tended to the garden. She'd taken it upon herself to revive his dying rose bushes, something 3 previous housekeepers had ignored entirely. She's fine, he said curtly. Fine? Helena raised an eyebrow. Darling, she quoted Toni Morrison while dusting my bookshelf yesterday. That's not fine. That's exceptional. That evening, insomnia struck again. Damien found himself drawn to the kitchen like a moth to flame, hoping to catch Grace studying. She was there, as he'd hoped, surrounded by medical journals and practice exams. Couldn't sleep again? She asked without looking up, as if his late-night appearances had become routine. Something like that. He moved to the espresso machine, muscle memory guiding his hands. How's the cardiovascular unit going? Brutal. She rubbed her temples. I have a practical exam Friday. If I fail, I'm out of the program. Damien set a cappuccino beside her textbook, noting the stress lines around her eyes. What's the practical involve? Emergency scenarios. We have to diagnose and treat simulated patients under pressure. Heart attacks, strokes, cardiac arrest. Her voice trembled slightly. I know the theory, but applying it when someone's life is on the line, you'll be fine. How can you be so sure? He studied her face, noting the determination beneath the fear. Because you care. That matters more than perfect technique. Grace looked up at him then, really looked, and something passed between them that made his chest tight. In the soft kitchen light, with her guard down and vulnerability showing, she was breathtaking. Why are you being nice to me? She asked quietly. The question caught him off guard. What do you mean? The coffee, the encouragement, asking about my classes. She set down her pen, giving him her full attention. Rich people don't usually care about their staff's dreams. Damien felt heat creep up his neck. Because I can't stop thinking about you, he thought. Because you're the first real thing in my life in years. Because when you smile, it's like the sun coming out. Maybe I'm not like other rich people, he said instead. No, she agreed softly. You're not. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Grace's lips parted slightly, and Damien found himself leaning closer, drawn by some invisible force. For a moment, the world narrowed to just her face, her scent, the rapid pulse at her throat. Then reality crashed back. He straightened abruptly, running a hand through his hair. I should let you study. Damien. Good night, Grace. He fled to his room like a coward, but sleep still wouldn't come. Instead, he lay awake thinking about brown eyes and quiet strength, about a woman brave enough to chase her dreams in his kitchen while the world slept. By morning, he'd made a decision that would change everything. He picked up his phone and dialed his lawyer. Richard, it's Damien. I need you to set up a scholarship fund. Full tuition, books, living expenses. Make it anonymous. What's the criteria? Damien closed his eyes, seeing Grace's face as she spoke about saving lives. Nursing students, community college level, people who are working multiple jobs to pay for school. He couldn't give her his heart. That was too dangerous, too complicated. But he could give her this. He could give her a future without the crushing weight of financial stress. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Grace burst through Damien's front door like a hurricane, her usual composure completely shattered. She'd been crying. He could tell from her red-rimmed eyes and the way she clutched a letter in her trembling hands. Grace? He rose from his desk, alarmed. What's wrong? I got it, she whispered. Then louder. I got it. Before he could ask what it was, she launched herself at him, throwing her arms around his neck in a hug that knocked the breath from his lungs. She smelled like vanilla and coffee, and her body fitted against his like she belonged there. The scholarship, she said against his shoulder, her voice muffled and thick with tears. Full tuition, books, even a living stipend. I can quit the diner job. I can focus on school. I can actually do this. Damien's arms closed around her automatically, and for a moment he let himself savor the feeling of holding her. She was warm and soft and everything good in his cold world. But then reality kicked in, and he gently set her away from him. That's incredible, he managed, trying to look surprised. What scholarship? The Archer Foundation. She wiped her eyes, beaming. Can you believe it? Someone with your last name is helping people like me. The universe has a sense of humor, right? His stomach dropped. He'd specifically told Richard to keep his name off it, to use a generic foundation title. But Richard had a twisted sense of loyalty and an even more twisted sense of humor. Grace, I have to call my mom. She's going to cry. Grace was practically bouncing with excitement. Do you mind if I use your phone? Mine's dead and I need to share this with someone. She was so happy, so purely joyful, that he couldn't bring himself to tell her the truth. Not yet. Of course. Use the one in the kitchen. While she made her call, he dialed Richard with shaking fingers. You bastard, he hissed when his lawyer answered. I told you to keep my name out of it. I used your middle name. Technically, you're not lying. She thinks it's a coincidence. Is it, though? Richard's voice was annoyingly smug. You're in love with your housekeeper, Damien. I've known you for 15 years. I can tell. This isn't about... It's about everything. When are you going to stop pretending this is charity and admit you'd do anything for her? Damien hung up, his hands shaking. From the kitchen came Grace's excited voice as she shared her news, and guilt ate at him like acid. She thought she'd earned this through merit alone. She didn't know her boss had fallen so hard he was literally buying her dreams. My mom cried, Grace announced, returning with tears streaming down her face again. Happy tears. She said this proves that good things happen to people who work hard. She's right, Damien said quietly. You deserve this. I've never felt this grateful in my entire life. She looked at him with such pure joy that his chest ached. Thank you for letting me use your phone. I know I'm supposed to be working, but take the day off. Celebrate. I can't afford... Grace. He stepped closer, unable to stop himself from reaching out to wipe a tear from her cheek. Take the day. Be happy. She caught his hand, pressing it against her face for a moment that stretched between them like eternity. You're a good man, Damien Archer. If only she knew. That evening, he found her in the kitchen again, but this time she wasn't studying. She was cooking, something that smelled incredible and homey in a way his house had never been. What's all this? Dinner. She turned from the stove, cheeks flushed from the heat. I wanted to thank you for everything, for letting me study here, for the coffee, For being kind when you didn't have to be. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. She ladled something that looked like beef stew into bowls. Sit. Eat. Let me take care of you for once. The food was simple, but perfect, like everything she touched. They ate in comfortable silence, the kitchen feeling more like home than his house ever had. Grace, he said finally, what if I told you that scholarship wasn't random? What if someone specific chose you? She looked up, confusion clouding her features. What do you mean? Damien opened his mouth to confess everything, but the words died in his throat. She was so happy, so proud of what she thought she'd achieved on her own. How could he tell her it was all a lie? Nothing, he said. I just think you were meant to have this opportunity. She smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. Maybe you're right. Maybe the universe finally decided to give me a break. As she cleaned up, humming softly to herself, Damien knew he was in deeper trouble than he'd ever imagined. Because this wasn't just about wanting her anymore. He was completely, hopelessly in love with her. 3 weeks later, Damien found Grace crying in his library. Not the happy tears of scholarship joy, but deep, soul-wrenching sobs that made his chest constrict. She sat curled in his leather reading chair, still in her scrubs from clinical rotation, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Grace? He knelt beside the chair, alarmed. What happened? Mrs. Chen died, she whispered, her voice broken. The patient I was assigned to. She had a massive stroke during my shift, and I couldn't. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Damien's heart cracked watching her blame herself for something clearly beyond her control. It wasn't your fault. I froze. She looked at him with haunted eyes. When the monitors started beeping, when she started seizing, I just stood there for 3 seconds too long. 3 seconds that might have made the difference. Grace, you're a student. You're learning. Learning? She laughed bitterly. I'm supposed to save lives, Damien. That's the whole point. And when it mattered, I failed. She tried to stand, probably to run away like she always did when emotions got too heavy. But Damien caught her hands, pulling her back down. Stop, he said firmly. Stop running from this. I can't do this anymore. Her voice cracked. I thought I was strong enough, but I'm not. I'm just a girl from East LA who cleans houses. What made me think I could be more? The defeat in her voice destroyed him. This was Grace. Fearless, determined Grace, talking about giving up on everything she'd worked for. Look at me, he commanded, tilting her chin up with gentle fingers. You're the strongest person I know. You work 2 jobs, put yourself through school, and still find energy to care for others. Mrs. Chen's death isn't on you. How can you be so sure? Because I see you. The words came out rougher than he intended. I see how you handle my mother's things like they're precious. How you brought my dying garden back to life. How you light up when you talk about helping people. You have more compassion in your little finger than most people have in their entire bodies. Grace stared at him, tears still streaming, but something shifted in her expression. Damien, I've been watching you for months, he continued, unable to stop now that the words were flowing. The way you move through the world with such grace, such purpose. You make everything better just by existing. You don't understand. I understand that I'm falling for you. The confession burst out of him like a dam breaking. I understand that you've turned my empty house into a home, that I look forward to finding you in my kitchen every night, that you're the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last thing before I sleep. Grace's breath caught. You can't mean that. I've never meant anything more in my life. The air between them crackled with electricity. Grace's eyes searched his face, looking for lies, for hidden motives. Instead, she found raw honesty that made her heart race. This is crazy, she whispered. I know. You're my boss. I know. We're from completely different worlds. I don't care. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away her tears. Grace, she kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, like she was testing the reality of the moment. But then Damien's arms came around her, pulling her closer, and the kiss deepened into something desperate and hungry. All the weeks of tension, of stolen glances and careful distance, exploded into this perfect collision of lips and hearts. Grace tasted like coffee and possibilities, her hands fisted in his shirt, anchoring herself to him as years of loneliness melted away under his touch. This was what she'd been running from. Not just attraction, but the terrifying realization that she was falling in love with a man who could never really be hers. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the world had shifted on its axis. What are we doing? Grace asked. her forehead resting against his. "I don't know," Damien admitted, "but I don't want to stop. This is going to end badly. Probably. People will say terrible things about us. Let them." Grace closed her eyes, feeling the last of her resistance crumble. "I should go home." "Stay," he said quietly. "Please, just stay." She looked at him, really looked, and saw her own feelings reflected back. Fear and hope and love all tangled together in a mess that should have been impossible. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll stay." Neither of them knew they were about to step into a firestorm that would test everything they thought they knew about love. For 3 weeks they lived in a beautiful lie. Grace still arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, still cleaned his house with professional efficiency, still called him Mr. Archer when his mother visited. But everything had changed in the spaces between. Stolen kisses in empty hallways, whispered conversations during lunch breaks, the way Damien's eyes followed her every movement like he was memorizing her existence. Their nights belonged to them alone. After Grace finished her cleaning, they'd cook dinner together, talking about everything and nothing. She'd curl up against him on his ridiculously expensive couch while he helped her study, his fingers playing with her hair as she practiced medical terminology. "Tachycardia," she said, not looking up from her textbook. "Rapid heart rate," Damien murmured against her temple. "Like what happens every time you walk into a room. That's terrible pillow talk. I'm out of practice." Grace turned in his arms, studying his face. "When was the last time you were in a relationship? A real one?" He considered the question seriously. "College, maybe. Everything since has been," he shrugged, "transactions, networking, women who wanted my money more than they wanted me. That's sad. It is what it is." "No," Grace said firmly. "It's sad. You deserve better than that." The sincerity in her voice made something twist in his chest. She had no idea she was the first person to see him as more than a bank account, and he was terrified of the day she'd realize the truth about the scholarship. Their secret felt fragile, precious, and completely unsustainable. The crash came on a Tuesday morning when Damien's business partner, Vincent Rodriguez, arrived unannounced for an emergency meeting about their latest acquisition. Grace was upstairs cleaning his bedroom, singing softly to herself, when Vincent's voice carried up the stairs. "Nice setup you have here," Vincent was saying as they climbed toward Damien's home office. "Though I still think you need better help. My housekeeper would never." Vincent stopped dead in the doorway as Grace emerged from the master bedroom, laundry basket in hand. Her hair was pulled back in its professional bun, but Damien could see the love bite he'd left on her neck the night before, barely hidden by her collar. "Sorry, Mr. Archer," she said quietly, not meeting his eyes. "I'll just—" "Grace." Vincent's voice was sharp with recognition. "Grace Nolan, right?" Damien's blood turned to ice. "You know her?" "Of course I know her. She's been cleaning my house for 2 years. Vincent's eyes narrowed as he looked between them, noting the tension, the way Grace wouldn't meet Damien's gaze. Though she quit suddenly a few months ago, something about a better opportunity. The silence that followed was deafening. Grace's face had gone pale, and Damien could practically see her mind racing, trying to figure out how to escape this moment. "I should let you get to your meeting," she said finally, moving toward the stairs. "Actually," Vincent said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "why don't you stay? I'm curious about this better opportunity you found." "Vincent," Damien warned. "What? I'm just making conversation." But his tone suggested otherwise. Vincent had the predatory instincts of a shark, and he'd smelled blood in the water. Grace lifted her chin with the dignity Damien had come to admire. "If you'll excuse me, I have work to finish." She left without another word, but the damage was done. Vincent watched her go with calculated interest, then turned to Damien with raised eyebrows. "Well, well, Damien Archer, pillar of the business community, screwing the help. This is rich. It's not like that, isn't it?" Vincent settled into a chair like he owned the place. "Let me guess. You're helping her through school, maybe setting up a little scholarship fund, playing the generous benefactor while she plays grateful?" Every word hit like a physical blow, because Vincent wasn't wrong about the scholarship, just wrong about Grace's motivations. "You don't know what you're talking about. I know enough. I know this could destroy your reputation if it got out. Tech mogul exploiting domestic worker? The media would have a field day. She's not being exploited. That's not how it'll look." Vincent leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You think the board will approve when they find out their CEO is compromising company image for a piece of ass? Damien was out of his chair before he realized he'd moved, his hands fisted at his sides. Say that again. Relax. Vincent held up his hands. I'm on your side, but you need to end this before it destroys everything you've built. After Vincent left, Damien found Grace in the kitchen, mechanically wiping down already clean counters. Her shoulders were rigid with tension, and she didn't look up when he entered. Grace, he's right, she said quietly. This was a mistake. No, it wasn't. I'm your employee, Damien. You could lose everything because of me. I don't care about everything else. Grace finally looked at him, and the pain in her eyes made his chest ache. I do. I care about what this costs you. What it costs both of us. So what are you saying? She set down the cleaning cloth with hands that trembled slightly. I'm saying maybe we should stop pretending this can work. The words hit him like a physical blow, but before he could respond, Grace had already walked away, leaving him alone with the echoes of a happiness that had lasted exactly 3 weeks. The next 2 weeks were torture. Grace still came to work, still cleaned his house with mechanical precision, but the woman who'd laughed in his kitchen and fallen asleep in his arms was gone. In her place was a polite stranger who called him Mr. Archer and avoided his eyes like looking at him physically hurt. Damien tried everything. He left her favorite coffee on the counter. He asked about her classes. He even attempted casual conversation about the weather, for Christ's sake. Grace responded with one-word answers and professional smiles that cut deeper than any anger could have. You're miserable, his mother observed during her Thursday visit, watching him pace the living room like a caged animal. Both of you. I don't know what you're talking about. Please. That girl looks like someone died and you're acting like a lovesick teenager. Helena sipped her tea with infuriating calm. What happened? Nothing happened. Damien Alexander Archer. I raised you better than to lie to your mother. He stopped pacing, running his hands through his hair. It's complicated. Love usually is. Who said anything about love? Helena's laugh was knowing and irritating. Darling, you've been in love with her for months. The only person who didn't see it was you. It doesn't matter. It can't work. Why not? Because, he gestured helplessly, because of everything. The money, the social differences, what people will say. Vincent made it clear that this could destroy my career. Vincent Rodriguez is a snake who's been jealous of your success since Harvard. Helena set down her teacup with a sharp click. Since when do you care what people think? Since it could hurt her. Have you asked what she wants? She already made her choice. Did she? Or did she make the choice she thought you needed her to make? Before Damien could answer, Grace appeared in the doorway, her face carefully blank. Excuse me, Mrs. Archer. I need to dust the mantle. Of course, dear. Helena stood gracefully. Actually, I was just leaving. Damien, walk me out. At the front door, his mother turned to him with steel in her eyes. You're going to lose her. She's not mine to lose. She could be, if you fight for her instead of hiding behind excuses. Mom, your father was poor when I met him. My parents threatened to disown me if I married beneath my station. Helena's voice softened with memory. Best decision I ever made. Don't let fear rob you of the same chance. That night, insomnia claimed him again. But when he went to the kitchen seeking the comfort of routine, Grace wasn't there. Her absence felt like a physical wound, the empty space where she belonged echoing with everything he'd lost. He found her the next morning, arriving at work with red-rimmed eyes and a forced smile that didn't fool anyone. Rough night? He asked gently. I'm fine, she lied. The same response she'd given for 2 weeks. Grace, we need to talk. There's nothing to talk about, Mr. Archer. The formal address was a slap. Stop calling me that. It's your name. Not to you. Never to you. For a moment her composure cracked, and he saw the pain she'd been hiding. It has to be. Why? Because this is killing me. The words burst out of her like a dam breaking. Because every time I look at you, I remember what it felt like to be happy, and I can't keep torturing myself with something I can't have. You can have it. We can have it. No, we can't. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Do you know what Vincent told his friends about us? I heard them at the country club where I picked up extra shifts. They called me your charity case. Said you were having a midlife crisis and slumming it with the help. Rage flooded through him, hot and vicious. Those people don't matter. They do to you. Your reputation, your business. Fuck my reputation. Grace flinched at the vehemence in his voice. You don't mean that. I mean every word. I don't care what Vincent thinks, or the board, or society pages. I care about you, and I care about you too much to let you destroy your life for me. The irony of it, her protecting him when he should be protecting her, made him want to scream. "Grace, please, I'm resigning," she said quietly. "Today's my last day." The words hit him like a physical blow. "You can't quit." "I already have. Mrs. Chen's family offered me a position as a private nurse for her husband. Better pay, normal hours. I can focus on school without—" She gestured between them. "Without this." "Without me, you mean?" "Yes," she whispered. "Without you." Damien stared at her. This woman who'd brought light into his dark world, who was now walking away to save him from himself. He wanted to tell her about the scholarship, about how he'd moved heaven and earth just to ease her burden. He wanted to drop to his knees and beg her to stay. Instead, he said, "If that's what you want, it's what's best." "Nah, for who?" Grace looked at him with such sadness it took his breath away. "For both of us." She left that afternoon without saying goodbye, taking his heart with her and leaving him alone in a house that had never felt emptier. That evening, Damien sat in his kitchen drinking whiskey and staring at the chair where she used to study, wondering how loving someone could hurt so much. Outside, thunder rolled across Los Angeles, and rain began to fall like tears from heaven. 3 months without Grace felt like 3 years. Damien threw himself into work with desperate intensity, acquiring 2 new companies and launching a revolutionary healthcare app that should have felt like triumph. Instead, every success felt hollow without her to share it with. His house remained pristine. The new cleaning service was efficient, but sterile. No one hummed while they worked. No one brought his dying garden back to life. He was reviewing quarterly projections when his assistant buzzed in. "Mr. Archer, there's a Lucia Nolan here to see you. She says it's about her daughter." Damien's blood turned to ice. Grace's mother. Something was wrong. Lucia Nolan was a smaller, older version of Grace, with the same determined chin and weary eyes. She sat across from his desk with her purse clutched tightly, clearly uncomfortable in his glass tower office. "Mrs. Nolan, is Grace okay?" "No," Lucia said bluntly. "She's not okay. She hasn't been okay since she left your house." Relief that she wasn't physically hurt warred with concern. "I don't understand. My daughter is the strongest person I know. She's worked since she was 15 to help support our family. Never complained, never gave up, even when life knocked her down over and over." Lucia's voice cracked slightly. "But these past months, she's been broken. She goes through the motions, work, school, sleep, but she's not living." Damien's chest tightened. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I know what you did." "What I did?" Lucia reached into her purse and pulled out a folder, sliding it across his desk. "The Archer Foundation scholarship. I hired a private investigator. Cost me a month's rent, but I had to know why someone would help Grace like that." Damien's mouth went dry as he opened the folder. His lawyer's signature on incorporation papers, bank records showing the initial funding, photos of him entering the foundation offices. All the evidence of his elaborate deception laid bare. "You created an entire scholarship program for my daughter," Lucia continued. $50,000 of your own money, just to help her achieve her dreams. That's not something a man does for an employee. That's something a man does when he's in love. Mrs. Nolan, she doesn't know, does she?" He shook his head, shame burning in his throat. "Why didn't you tell her?" "Because she's proud. Because she needed to believe she earned it herself. Because—" He stopped, the truth too painful to voice. "Because you were afraid she'd leave you if she knew." "Yes." Lucia studied him for a long moment. "My daughter thinks you got tired of her. That you let her go because the relationship wasn't worth the trouble. That's not— I know that. You know that. But Grace doesn't. She thinks she was just some charity case you played with until reality got too complicated." The words hit him like physical blows. "I never thought of her that way." "Then why didn't you fight for her?" "Because everyone said it would destroy my career. Vincent threatened." "Vincent Rodriguez is a coward and a fool." Lucia's voice turned hard. "My daughter is worth 100 of him. She's worth 100 of all of them. I know that. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you chose your reputation over her heart." Damien closed his eyes, the accusation hitting its mark. "I thought I was protecting her. From what? Love? Happiness? A man who would literally move mountains to help her succeed? From the judgment, the cruel things people would say about her. Grace has been judged her whole life for being poor, for being Latina, for daring to dream bigger than her circumstances. Your cowardice isn't protecting her. It's destroying her." The brutal honesty left him speechless. Lucia stood, her mission apparently complete. "She's graduating next week," she said quietly. "Top of her class. She got a job offer at Cedars-Sinai in their trauma unit, her dream job. She should be celebrating, but instead she's going through the motions like a ghost. What do you want me to do? I want you to decide what kind of man you are. The kind who fights for love, or the kind who hides behind money and social status when things get difficult. She reached the door before turning back. Grace loved you, really loved you. The kind of love that comes once in a lifetime if you're lucky. But love isn't enough if you're too afraid to fight for it. After she left, Damien sat alone in his office as the sun set over Los Angeles. He thought about Grace's face the night she'd cried over her patient's death, how she'd trusted him with her vulnerability. He thought about the scholarship folder now spread across his desk, evidence of love disguised as charity. He thought about his mother's words, "Don't let fear rob you of the same chance." Most of all, he thought about Grace somewhere across the city, achieving her dreams while her heart remained broken because he'd been too much of a coward to fight for what they had. Vincent was right about one thing. Loving Grace would change everything. His reputation, his social circle, his carefully constructed life. But maybe it was time for everything to change. Maybe it was time to stop hiding behind money and status and fight for the only thing that had ever made him truly happy. Maybe it was time to choose love over fear. Damien picked up his phone and dialed his lawyer. "Richard, I need you to arrange something. Grace Nolan's nursing graduation next Friday. I want to rent the auditorium at UCLA. I want flowers, thousands of them. I want—" "Damien," Richard interrupted. "What are you doing?" "Something I should have done months ago. I'm fighting for her." Grace's graduation day arrived with perfect California sunshine, but she felt nothing but numbness as she sat in the UCLA auditorium surrounded by her celebrating classmates. She'd achieved everything she'd dreamed of, graduating summa cum laude, landing her dream job at Cedars-Sinai Trauma Unit, proving that a girl from East LA could make something of herself. So why did success feel so empty? "Grace Nolan," the dean called, and she walked across the stage in a daze, accepting her diploma with a smile that felt carved from stone. The audience applauded, but the only sound she heard was the echo of her own heartbreak. After the ceremony, she stood in the lobby with her mother, mechanically accepting congratulations from professors and classmates. Everyone kept asking about her plans, her excitement, her future. She gave all the right answers while feeling absolutely nothing. "Mija," her mother said quietly, "there's something I need to tell you. Later, Mom. I just want to go home. It's about Damien." Grace's heart clenched at the name she'd forbidden herself to think about for months. "I don't want to hear it. He created the scholarship for you." The words hit her like a physical blow. "What?" "The Archer Foundation. It was him. He set up the entire program just to help you through school." Grace stared at her mother, the world tilting on its axis. "That's impossible. I have proof." Lucia handed her a folder. "He spent $50,000 of his own money because he loved you that much." Grace's hands shook as she opened the folder, seeing bank records, incorporation papers, all bearing Damien's signature. The scholarship that had changed her life, that had allowed her to focus on school instead of working multiple jobs. It had all been him. "Why didn't he tell me?" she whispered. "Because he knew you were too proud to accept charity from someone you loved. This isn't charity. This is—" Grace couldn't finish the sentence, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he'd done. He'd literally bought her dreams and hidden his generosity behind a foundation, letting her believe she'd earned it through merit alone. "He's here," her mother said softly. Grace looked up to see Damien walking through the lobby, and her breath caught. He looked different, thinner, tired, like the past 3 months had aged him years. But his eyes, when they found hers across the crowded room, blazed with an intensity that made her knees weak. The crowd seemed to part as he approached, conversations dying as people recognized the billionaire tech mogul walking through a community college graduation like he belonged there. "Grace," he said when he reached her, her name a prayer on his lips. "Why are you here?" "Because I'm done being a coward." He looked around at the staring faces, the phones recording their interaction, and she saw the moment he chose love over reputation. "Because I should have fought for you 3 months ago." "Damien!" "I love you." The words rang out across the lobby, causing a ripple of shocked whispers. "I love your strength, your compassion, your determination to make the world better. I love how you hum when you're happy, and how you make my house feel like home. I love that you see people, really see them, when everyone else looks through them." Grace felt tears starting to fall, 3 months of suppressed emotion overwhelming her defenses. "You let me go. The biggest mistake of my life. He stepped closer, his voice breaking. I thought I was protecting you from judgment, from the cruel things people would say, but I was really protecting myself from having to choose between you and everything else. And now I choose you. I choose us. I choose love over fear, over reputation, over everything else that doesn't matter. He dropped to one knee right there in the crowded lobby, pulling a ring box from his pocket as gasps echoed around them. Grace Nolan, you are the strongest, most beautiful woman I've ever known. You've made me want to be better, to deserve the love you gave me. Will you marry me? The auditorium had gone completely silent, hundreds of people holding their breath as they waited for her answer. Grace looked down at this man who'd just risked everything for her, who'd gotten down on his knees in front of strangers and cameras to prove his love was real. You created an entire scholarship program for me, she said, her voice shaking. I would have created 1,000 if that's what it took to help you achieve your dreams. You're willing to risk your reputation, your business, everything? My reputation means nothing without you. My business is just numbers on a screen. You're the only thing that matters. Grace thought about the past 3 months of emptiness, of going through the motions while her heart remained frozen. She thought about the scholarship that had changed her life, the elaborate lengths he'd gone to just to ease her burden without taking credit. You magnificent, impossible man, she whispered, then louder. Yes. The lobby erupted in cheers as Damien slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms. The kiss they shared was desperate and joyful and 3 months overdue, tasting of tears and promises and second chances. When they finally broke apart, Grace was laughing and crying simultaneously. This is going to be all over social media in an hour. Let it be, Damien said fiercely. Let the whole world know I'm lucky enough to love you. Vincent's going to have a heart attack. Vincent can go to hell. Grace looked around at the crowd of people filming them, at the evidence of Damien's love spread across her mother's folder, at the diploma in her hand representing dreams that had seemed impossible just 2 years ago. So what now? She asked. Now we plan a wedding, Damien said, spinning her around. Now we build a life together. Now we prove that love really can conquer everything, social differences, fear, and certainly Vincent Rodriguez's opinions. Grace laughed, feeling truly happy for the first time in months. I love you, Damien Archer. I love you too, future Mrs. Archer. As they walked out of the auditorium hand in hand, Grace realized that sometimes the most impossible love stories were the ones most worth fighting for. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, the millionaire who caught his maid studying at night might just be brave enough to choose love over everything else. The future stretched before them, bright with possibility, and anchored in a love that had survived separation, social pressure, and their own fears. It wouldn't always be easy. They'd face judgment, challenges, and Vincent's continued disapproval, but they'd face it together, and that made all the difference. 1 year later, Grace Archer, she still smiled every time she heard her married name, stepped out of the trauma bay at Cedars-Sinai at 11:47 p.m., exhaustion weighing on her shoulders, but satisfaction warming her chest. Another life saved, another family kept whole. The 13-hour shift had been brutal, but she wouldn't trade this work for anything. Her phone buzzed with a text from Damien. Dinner's waiting. So am I. The drive from the hospital to their new house, smaller than the Beverly Hills mansion, warmer, more them, took 20 minutes through quiet LA streets. They'd moved 6 months ago, wanting something that belonged to both of them, rather than just him. The craftsman in Los Feliz had a garden Grace could nurture and a kitchen where they cooked together every night she wasn't working. She found Damien in that kitchen now, plating what looked like her grandmother's enchilada recipe with surprising competence. He'd been taking cooking classes as a surprise, learning to make all her favorite comfort foods. How'd you know I'd need this tonight? She asked, sliding her arms around his waist from behind. Because you had that complex trauma case this morning. You always need comfort food after the hard ones. He turned in her arms, studying her face with the attention he'd always paid to her moods. How did it go? Touch and go for 6 hours, but we pulled him through. Motorcycle versus semi-truck. She leaned against his chest, breathing in his familiar scent. His daughter was the same age I was when Dad died. I kept thinking about Mom, how scared she must have been. Damien's arms tightened around her, and now he gets to go home to her. Now he gets to go home. They ate dinner on their back patio, surrounded by the roses Grace had transplanted from the Beverly Hills house and the vegetables they'd planted together last spring. The media attention had died down months ago, though they still occasionally made society pages, Usually when the Archer Foundation announced another scholarship recipient. Vincent called today, Damien said as they cleaned up. Oh God, what did he want? To apologize, actually. His daughter just started at UCLA on an Archer Foundation scholarship. Apparently, she's the first in his family to go to college. Damien's smile was wry. He said he finally understands why you were worth all the trouble. Grace snorted. How generous of him. He also wants to contribute to the foundation, major donor level. People. Grace shook her head, but she was smiling. What changed his mind? Probably the fact that we've helped over 200 nursing students in the past year. Hard to argue with results. The Archer Foundation had grown beyond anything Grace had imagined. What started as one man's elaborate way to help the woman he loved had become a genuine force for change, providing scholarships, mentorship, and support to healthcare workers from underserved communities. I have news, Grace said as they settled on the couch, her legs curled under her. Good news or bad news? Depends on your perspective. She took a breath, nervous despite everything they'd been through together. I'm pregnant. Damien went completely still, his coffee mug frozen halfway to his lips. You're 8 weeks. I found out this morning but wanted to wait until after my shift to tell you, in case... She couldn't finish the sentence. The worry, too fresh. In case what? His voice was soft with wonder. In case something went wrong. In case you weren't ready. In case... He kissed her quiet, deep and desperate and full of joy. When they broke apart, his eyes were bright with tears. Are you crying? She teased. Maybe. Is that okay? More than okay. They held each other in the quiet of their living room, processing the magnitude of this new chapter. A year ago, Grace had been cleaning houses and studying in secret. Now she was married to her best friend, working her dream job and carrying their child. What kind of parent do you think I'll be? Damien asked quietly. Grace thought about the man who'd created a scholarship program just to ease her burden, who'd learned to cook her favorite foods, who supported her through every difficult case and celebrated every small victory. The kind who moves mountains for the people they love, she said. The kind who sees potential where others see problems. The kind who believes in dreams and makes them possible. And you? I'll be the kind who teaches them that love doesn't care about money or status, that strength comes from compassion, that sometimes the most impossible things are the most worth fighting for. Outside, rain began to fall on their garden, the same summer storms that had marked the beginning of their love story. But this time, instead of tears from heaven, it felt like a blessing. Grace curled deeper into Damien's arms, one hand resting on her still flat belly where their future was growing. They'd traveled a long road from that first night in his kitchen, through separation and heartbreak, through judgment and fear, through the choice to love openly despite the cost. Now, surrounded by the life they'd built together, Grace finally understood what her mother had meant about love being worth fighting for. Sometimes the millionaire really did choose the maid. Sometimes love really could conquer all the things that tried to keep it apart. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, your impossible love story became the foundation for something even more beautiful. A family. Question for reflection. If you were Grace and discovered that the man you love secretly funded your education without you knowing, would you consider this proof of true love or manipulation disguised as generosity? And if you were Damien, would you have the courage to risk your career, reputation, and social status for someone society considers beneath your level? Which moment in the story touched your heart the most? When he first found her studying, when he secretly created the scholarship, or when he publicly got down on one knee to propose? Can true love really overcome all social and financial barriers? Or do you think class differences always end up destroying relationships? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments.